Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, we're in for a treat today. We teased this pretty well about communication and marketing and how do we combine the excellence in communication there. So I think it's appropriate that we pause and think through our favorite ad campaigns or marketing slogans or companies or whichever. So what comes to mind for you guys?
Well, first of all, the first one that comes to my mind is strong enough for a man, but made for a woman.
That's a deodorant. Is it Secret?
Secret.
There we go.
Please use your Secret. I tell my teenage girls, ladies, you need to reapply your Secret.
Hey, I tell you what, we talk about the ad campaigns. I tell you, one of the most effective, I think, is when Coke went and did of course, Coke is great. They've done it great for years. They had the picturesque people on the mountain. I'd like to buy the world a Coke and teach the world to sing or whatever. And then they have where they put the names on the cans where it sent you out to the store. Like, even if you weren't craving a Coke, if you saw you wanted to buy that Coke, if you saw one of your friends' names or relatives or whatever it might be, and they really drove you to not only, being drawn to their campaign, but they got you to act on it, where you wanted to collect all your family's names on a can. I named my kid Ryman, so that never would work for us. But
well, the funny thing about those, and I've had a chance to be in marketing way back in the day, and the amount of ideas that never left the conference table or the idea board. When I hear, like you just pitched, the names on the Coke bottles, I'm imagining the think tank sitting around and the people going, yeah, I don't think that'll work because now we've divided people down in such tribes. When you look in the cooler, 90% of the cans are not your name. Therefore, people might not want to buy it. And I can see this whole group think beginning to take hold. And how did that idea make it through? And that's where I think we have experts like Shannon, our guest today, who's going to help us understand some of the whys behind all this and why we do what we do it for. One of my favorite campaigns along the way, and this is fairly old, but it's one that when somebody says, what's your favorite? I remember this from a child. They had this hot cast iron frying pan sitting on a stovetop. And they said, this is your brain. And then they take an egg and they crack it and they say, this is your brain on drugs. And, it's one of those images you never, ever forget in there. I'm also blown away by the Mac or the Apple commercials. They have won numerous awards for thinking differently. And I use that a little pun intended on that one. And then more recently, I was noticing at last year's Super Bowl. I always watch the Super Bowl, not for the play. I could care less who's playing. And if you know me as a sports fan, that's absolutely true. In fact, the guys in the room, I'm like, shut up, it's commercial time. I don't want them to talk. But one of my favorite ones last year's Super Bowl was done by Google. And it's a person who had dementia. And he's like, hey, play my favorite song. And he was noting, and the Google Home was documenting the story of his life, his wife, his favorites, so that when his mind went, Google would be able to remember it for him. And man, I wanted to just cry in front of those men when that commercial was played. What's one that you would not have wanted to act on, but after seeing it, you went out and bought the product? Let me ask that question.
I think the car the car commercials really get me a lot of times. I mean, I'm always thinking about safety and those kinds of things. And so I'm going to tell you guys, we're Jeep owners. We own a Jeep Wrangler, and I love Jeep commercials. You just, you think you need a Jeep to drive your family around. I mean, it's just crazy how marketing and its effect on us is maddening sometimes. I mean, awesome, but maddening all at the same time.
Yes, I was the same way when I saw the new commercial for the Broncos. I
Those are
seriously,
impressive looking.
oh, they are, and I seriously struggle with the 10th commandment there, and, coveting when I saw a Bronco. But it made it a lot easier when I saw the price tag of the new Bronco. And so there you go.
Oh my goodness. Speaking of price tag, let me shift into one item. We're going to jump into Shannon Litton's interview here in just a moment. But a number of you look for places that you can give or invest around the holidays. We're in the month of December, and if you're looking for one more place where the end of the year gift would make a huge difference, let's just pose the question: would you like to invest in that which is benefiting you right now? Family ministry, this podcast, family ministry around the world, investing in discipleship initiatives, the D6 app. Many of you have laughed doing the family questions. If you've not downloaded that D6 app and enjoyed that moment, many of the families are blessed by that because people support what we do. And if you'd like to support and give an end of the year gift, please go to our website, d6family.com, click on the giving button, and sign up to be one of our partners that makes all of these items possible.
Are you seeking clarity in your vision for family ministry? Randall House Publishing has brought together 15 ministry experts to provide a resource that offers practical ways to measure and adjust every aspect of ministry. Recalibrate, a new measure for family ministry, is one of our best-selling family ministry titles. The book covers topics including cultural challenges, staff and volunteer dynamics, meaningful conversations, prodigals, and many more. The 15 contributors bring to the table their depth of ministry experience as they offer guidance in children's ministry, youth ministry, churched kids with unchurched parents, marriage ministry, and the art of family conversations, along with several other categories. Let these experts give you a clearer vision for the future of your ministry. Visit d6family.com today to order your copy of Recalibrate. All royalties from the sale of this publication go to support D6 International.
We are joined today with Shannon Litton. Shannon is the president and CEO of the 5x5 agency in Brentwood, Tennessee. She has worked with over 300 organizations on everything from rebranding to multilingual, multicultural marketing. Shannon frequently speaks on leadership, marketing, rebranding, and strategy. Today, she serves on the Advisory Council of the Christian Leadership Alliance, the Association of Business Professionals, and the board at Trevecca Nazarene University. Ask her about her favorite accomplishment, though, and she'll proudly tell you that 5x5 has been named to the Inc. 5000 list 3 years in a row. And today she lives in Franklin, Tennessee with her husband and her 5 children, 2 of whom are adopted from Ethiopia. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so glad that you decided to join us.
Me too. Thanks for the invite. This is a fun conversation.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. So I'd like to just jump right in. I'd like if you would just explain the 5x5 agency. That kind of sounds like a strange name for a digital marketing agency. Can you give us a quick explanation about why you and your partners chose the name 5x5?
Sure. Well, first of all, choosing a name is a really hard thing to do. Anybody that's done it knows that. Mm-hmm. You find a name that you like, and then, inevitably the URL isn't available. So we either have to, misspell it or add something to it. And so, naming a creative agency is its own kind of challenge. And when we were looking for a name, we ran across this term that was an old communications term, and it's actually 5x5. And it's the way they used to rank a signal strength. They used it a lot in radio, pilots used it. And so if you think about two 1 to 5 point scales, 5x5 actually is the best possible signal strength that you could give. So it kind of means loud and clear. And what they were ranking those two things on were how clear the signal was and how strong the signal was. So you could have, 1x5, 5x1, but if you had the clearest signal and the strongest signal, then you were 5x5.
Well, that's really cool and very creative, but also a really cool opportunity for you to get to share about what 5x5 is and what you can do for the people that you serve. I think that's really awesome. So, which leads us into a great conversation today, one that I think many people don't like to have. They're kind of uncomfortable with it and stuff, but I feel like you are the best in the biz in the marketing space, but also you're a strong believer. Having faith in Christ and a relationship with Him is of utmost importance to you, and I'm thankful for that. But I'm also thankful that you are in this line of work. We need believers like you in this line of work, and so I think you'll be able to shed some light on this topic today, unlike a lot of people would be able. So you've worked with businesses and organizations of all types from all over the country and the world for that matter. So let's talk about marketing. What is the value that marketing brings to a business or organization?
Well, I think it actually goes back to that 5x5 term, and that's why we loved it so much is, marketing is something that is such a big word. It can mean so many different things. And so to figure out what it really is hard. And to do that simply is even harder to do. And so I think marketing goes back to those two pillars of the 5x5 signal strength. And I think marketing is about bringing clarity. So when we are good at marketing, and there are so many things that we can call it, marketing, communications, in church, we love the word outreach, great, whatever we call it, it's about bringing clarity. And then the second thing we talked about in that 5x5 scale was the signal strength, but it's also about how do we reach people with that? So once we have a clear message, how are we reaching people? And so any business or organization needs a clear message, and you need to reach people with it. And to me, that's the simplest definition of marketing.
Okay, so how about, though, your experience with churches? I think that people see it a little differently. You've had experience working with local churches throughout the U.S. So what would you say is the value then of marketing for the local church? And would you say that it differs from that of a secular organization or a business?
Well, the outcomes really don't differ at all. I mean, marketing is about sharing a message in a clear way that gets somebody to act. So even if we don't call it marketing in the local church, we're doing that over and over and over. We're trying to share a clear message that moves somebody to act, whether that is coming to a service, whether that's accepting Christ, whether that's following Him, whether that's discipleship, whatever it is. We are doing marketing, and we can call it anything we want, but that's what we're doing. And at churches, we say things over and over and over. Churches a lot of times complain that we've said it a million times and nobody's heard it. It was in the bulletin, and we put it in the email, and it was up there on the slideshow. But that's really the core of marketing, is that we share things over and over and over. And if we're clear, people start to hear it. If we don't say it over and over again, people don't get it. And sometimes we get bored with our own messages in the church. Mm-hmm. But, we're called to say the same things over and over and over and over. And unless we're tired of saying the same things over and over, we probably haven't said them enough.
Sure. So in thinking about all of those different avenues, I mean, you just named just a few within the local church right there about how we do it already. Right. But in your experience, what aspects of marketing should the local church adopt? So what are some things maybe that they need to be careful of, but also things that they need to be sure that they are addressing?
Yeah. Well, I think, going back, I'm going to say this word, you're going to be so sick of it. Casey, but clarity is the number one thing. And so, we love here at 5x5, we love StoryBrand, Donald Miller's StoryBrand, and just the framework of it is really effective for churches too. And one of the principles in there is if you confuse, you lose. And we do that so often in the local church is we say things that are confusing. So I think the number one thing that we have to adopt as churches is we have to look through all of our messages, through everything that we're sharing and say, is this clear? Is this clear to the person that it should be clear to? Not clear to me. We use all this language sometimes, and then we don't understand why, the world doesn't understand what we're saying. Well, it's not clear to them. So how do we make sure that we're clear? How do we speak to our audience? That's really what Jesus was doing in parables. Jesus was the best marketer of all. And I don't know if that doesn't offend anybody, but if marketing is storytelling, Jesus was a great storyteller. He spoke in parables just so that people could understand it. That's what we've got to do in the local church. We have to understand that, marketing isn't some, voodoo magic. It's not some big business term. It's really about telling a compelling and clear story. When you talk about what do we stay away from, I think the one thing we've just got to stay away from in the churches is just trying to do too much. Sometimes when we embrace marketing, we try to overdo it. We try to make things look too good. We try to make our message too clever. I always say, we can be clever or we can be clear. I hope we can be both, but if we only have to choose one, let's be clear. And sometimes I think in church we use this inside baseball language. Sometimes we just try to be too clever. And if you're losing clarity because of that, I think we really, not only do we lose, but the people we're trying to reach, they lose the message.
Yeah. Those are really great points and tips. We have a lot of church leaders and pastors who tune in, listening in on the podcast. So maybe there's a pastor or another church leader sitting there and they're considering, do we need to utilize a marketing team, or do we need to, kind of dip our toes into that, or what does that look like? So can you just give them, a few pointers? What are their first steps? They're just starting out. What are their first steps in leading into that?
So I would say first you need to figure out where are your needs? Where are you missing it? So, you start with kind of filling in those gaps. So if things aren't clear, if we don't really have a system to communicate to our church members, to our audience, to our own people that come every Sunday, we need to start there. Let's start with filling in those gaps. Let's put somebody in charge of that. Communications can be the type of thing in a church that nobody really owns. And when nobody really owns it, we don't do it well. Mm-hmm. So whose responsibility is it to make sure that we are being clear and that we're saying things enough in enough ways that people can really understand them? And so once you know where your needs are, then I would say we also rarely set goals. There's some really big Facebook groups of church communicators. And if a pastor wants to know what church communicators think about church communications, go join some of those groups because it's fascinating to see. And I think what I hear over and over again from people that are tasked with communications and marketing in local churches is that they don't really have an end goal. Communication is this ongoing thing, but what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to do a better job of communicating to our own church members? If so, then let's figure out what the goals are there. What does that look like? Is this really about outreach? If it is, that's a very different strategy of how are we communicating in a way that people in our community and people outside our church walls will understand. So I think we've got to define those in the beginning. If we don't know what success looks like, we'll never know when we get there, and we never feel like we're actually accomplishing anything. I think that's where we miss it in church marketing sometimes. The other thing I would just say, Casey, is figure out what do you need to have on your team and what can you outsource? So there are times where, I think building a new church website is a great example. I've seen churches, we need to do better with our website and with our digital. So let's go hire a developer. We need a developer for a short period of time because building that initial site is one thing. The ongoing maintenance of it and keeping that up is a whole different skill. So let's look at what are those ongoing needs and let's fill those first. And then the other things that ebbs and flows, and sometimes we need it, sometimes we don't. There are great freelancers. You might even have them in your congregation that would be willing to fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those team members. Let's say, again, we're addressing the church leaders and the pastors who are listening, and they're like, okay, now you've given me some first steps. I need to make sure that we have clarity, that we're communicating these things properly. What do we want to do? What are we aiming for? Now, who's on my team? Does it have to be someone in marketing? Does it have to be someone who's in the church? Describe who needs to be a part of that team for us.
Yeah, I think the first person I want on my team is a really good communicator. So somebody who knows how to communicate, not somebody who's a fantastic copywriter. We can over copyright things all the time and take a really simple message and make it so beautiful that nobody understands it. So I'm not looking necessarily for somebody who's got, books that they've written and copywriting skills, who can just communicate really clearly. We worked with a church out in Silicon Valley, and they're a multi-campus church, and they didn't have a marketing team. And at some point they said, this is really confusing and people don't know where to get information, and we need to establish that team. And so they actually looked around, and what they found was their middle school pastor was really great at communicating. And if you think about communicating to middle schoolers, you have to be, right? You have have to be able to be straightforward and clear. I've got quite a few in my house. I know this. You know this, Casey.
Yes, yeah.
So they looked around, they said, man, she doesn't have a lot of marketing experience, but she's a great communicator. And she has built one of, I think, the best teams of church communicators and church marketing teams in the country. And so find somebody who knows how to communicate well and is organized. There's a lot of organization. There's a lot of project management that happens in marketing. And if we can do those things well first, then we can go deeper. I would just say maybe the second person is somebody that really understands digital, and digital's a big term, but somebody understands, website and social and digital practices. They don't need to be a developer. They don't need to have all of the technical skills, but they need to be somebody, don't turn your church Facebook over to somebody who doesn't use Facebook, right? So find somebody that actually understands it and can help you figure out, how do we translate all these things that we're trying to do in the church? We're not creating new goals for social and digital and the web. How do we take these church goals and initiatives and strategies, and then we just bring them over onto this platform? And I think that's the second type of person that I would look for.
That's great. So how do you know if your marketing's working? We're kind of going, off script here, but how do you know that? How can you measure, like after you've put this team together, you've gotten your goals, how do you know if it's working?
Yeah, well, it's hard to do. It depends on the goals, first of all. So that's why I really think it's important. Let's say these are the things we're trying to do. Then once we know, one of the things we're trying to do is we are trying to just increase our awareness in the community, if that's our goal, right? That we kind of sit here in the middle of this growing community and nobody knows we're here. You hear that a lot with churches. Mm-hmm. So our goal is we want more people to know that our church is here and that we are a welcoming place for them. So if that's our goal, then we need to start to figure out, what are the metrics? That's a marketing term, right? But what are the metrics that we're watching? And it could be social media engagement. It could be people that come in and fill out a visitor form and say, I heard about you online. It could be visitors to the website. I think we don't put enough emphasis on things like that in the church. Your website is your front door anymore. It really is. And so when people move into a community, when people are, looking for a church home in a community, they are looking online. And so if we're trying to get more people to know about us in a community, then we need to start looking at the metrics and the numbers to know if we're actually accomplishing that. And somebody that really understands marketing can help you to know what are the metrics that line up with your goals. And it gives us, then it becomes a little more than voodoo magic, right? Like, is it working and do people know us? Then we start to look at these numbers and we can say, these numbers are growing, and that's an indicator that what we're doing is working.
Yeah, that's great. So are there any other insights that you might be willing to share with us about marketing or branding and marrying those things with the local church?
Well, it's funny. We used to do this exercise with local churches, and we would say, we're just going to imagine. Here's a big whiteboard, and we're going to imagine that we can only do ministry online. Nobody can walk into our building, and what would that look like? And it was this big fictitious exercise that we did.
And here we are.
And here we are, right? And then it all comes to life, and we find out in real life what it looks like to do ministry online. And so I think the lesson of 2020, for all its stops and starts and trying to figure out whether to use Facebook Live or YouTube or what do we do for our online services, the big lesson is that we can't really fight online and digital, and we shouldn't. It's a tool. It is not online properties and digital experiences. They are neither good nor bad. It's not that they're right or wrong. It's what we do with them. And so we shouldn't fight those anymore. And we shouldn't fight media. We shouldn't fight marketing. Whatever we call those terms, we really need to embrace them. I think we either see it as an enemy or we see it as a mission field. And so my hope is that as the church, that we start to see that what we can do to reach people, to see people for who they are, to see them for their needs, to reach out to them when they're hurting. We have a mission field online, and I really believe that that's where we can create such impact for the kingdom if we can not run from it, but embrace it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you, Shannon, so much for joining me today. Thank you for all of your insights. It really has been a great conversation. If you have any questions or you'd like for Shannon and her team to serve you, check out their website at 5by5agency.com. That's 5by5agency.com. Shannon, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Casey.
I absolutely loved this interview. And, I get to be a part of the marketing team at D6 Family and get to work with the lovely Lena Wooten. And she has taught me so much about marketing. But I think I was inspired by the unique opportunity that we have as churches to efficiently and effectively communicate vision. And she said something so profound to me that I thought, gosh, I've been discussing this with my own husband, who is responsible for communications at our church. She said, we're moving someone to act. That's the goal, but our messages need to be clear, and we need to think about how we're reaching people with it. She talked about clarity and strategy over and over and over again. She kind of restated that and just gave some practical tips on how to do that. But I love that she mentioned clarity. And she said, if you confuse, you lose. Mm. And that so many times in the church world, we want to be clever more than we want to be clear. And that can sometimes be dangerous because then we lose our message. We lose the message of what we're trying to communicate. I was just really challenged by that, it's not so always worth being clever. It's more important to be clear.
Yes. I see that often when I visit other churches, or, I maybe consult a kids ministry or family ministry in a church. And I'm not calling anybody out, but a lot of times we assume people know what we're talking about. Like if your youth group is not named Converge or Fuse, or, joins for Fuse on Wednesday night, and you're like, what is Fuse? Like, I don't know. It's one of those things that I have started into my old age, tried to get away from more clever. It's middle school ministry, high school ministry, your church name, and then students or whatever it might be, just so the people coming in from the outside will know what you're talking about before you even, you don't have to explain to them what it is. The name alone really brings it forth, and one thing that she said that I need reminding of sometimes, it's another thing, it's an assuming. We think because we sent out the email or we posted it on our Facebook pages or we brought it up from the stage or in the bulletin, that everybody hears it once and has it and's got it, and she made the point of, if you're not tired of saying it over and over, like, you're probably not saying it enough. Mm-hmm. And as Andy Stando says, vision leaks, and that we've got to continue over and over and over to be pouring out that vision and make sure that it is clear, and she said, with, marketing, it's, we usually think of marketing as a business term, and putting church and marketing together seems like a bad thing to do. And you're like, no, we don't want to do that. But the truth is, like she said, and Donald Miller says, is marketing is simply storytelling. And Jesus was the best storyteller to ever come along. And like we said, our end goal in trying to accomplish is to make our message clear and move people into action. We want to do that in our churches. Mm-hmm. And so it's marketing, call it what you want, but that's what it is. And I think the firmer grasp we get on that as a church and in our people groups, the more effective we can be.
Mm-hmm. Shannon's spot on that. And it's a great reminder to us that repetition of casting vision. Another guru I like to read after, one of my favorites that Shannon is certainly echoing, is Patrick Lencioni. And he says in one of his books, he said, sometimes leaders of organizations think that when they say something one time, people get it. When they say it a second time, they think they're emphasizing it. And if they say it a third time, they think they sound stupid, because leaders assume people get it, and you don't think you need to say it that many times. And, the adage used to be, you need to say something 7 times before they get it. Well, now people are bombarded with so much information and messaging. Now the rule of thumb is somewhere between 12 and 30 times. And here's what Patrick said about it, and Shannon said it in a different way, but exactly the same outcome. Until you hear somebody say what you said on vision in the hallway, you overhear somebody say it, your people don't get it. You need to hear somebody else use it in their own words, or maybe in the same phrase, before you know you've said it enough. And you're right, you are sick of it.
I think another thing that I love that she highlighted towards the end that I think we all kind of need to lean into, just and COVID exposed it. And we've talked about this in previous podcast conversations, but your website is your front door. It's your welcome mat into your church. And that is where people are going. So you've got to be very clear and be strategic about what your website looks like, how it welcomes people, what your initiatives are, what your vision is. You need a strategy for that. That's important. And she did say this, and this is huge. This is huge in the family. This is huge in the church. This is huge in your professional world. If no one owns communication, it will not be done well. Yeah. Drop the mic, Miss Shannon. Yeah. That was so powerful to me and just so remarkable. If no one owns the communication, it will not be done well. That is true for marriage. That is true for family. That is true for ministry. That is true for all of us today, is we've got to own the responsibility for communication. We just do.
Well, the one thing that she really, there were several things, but she says we have to define what success looks like, because if we don't know we won't know what it looks like when we get there. We won't even know that we're there, and putting those markers along the road and defining what a win actually looks like within our churches.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Well, we're very blessed to have these incredible, insightful people to kind of cast vision. And you think, well, wow, I'm listening to the D6 Family Ministry podcast, and you've got a marketer on. But again, you see how this affects family ministry. You see how it affects family. You see how this affects your church's communication. That's why we bring together such talented people. We don't know everything, but we know people who know everything. And that's why we try to be a big, important resource in your life. And we're very honored to have you listening. We look forward to seeing you back with us in a week.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.